Hey, welcome back to another video on Vancouver Island. Today we are talking about what can you grow in a milk jug. It is February. It is definitely not too late to be sowing seeds in milk jugs. And at the end of this video, I'll give you a quick little demo on how I sow seeds in milk jugs. There's lots of tutorials out there. I sow seeds a little differently than most people. And we're going to talk first about what can you sow in a milk jug. And to answer that, the easy answer is absolutely anything your heart desires. I've been sowing seeds in milk jugs. I want to say this is the 5th growing season. And I have done everything, all different kinds of flowers and herbs and vegetables. And the answer is really anything. Pretty much anything will grow in a milk jug. If you do not get germination, it is very likely not because of your soil or your amendments. It is likely because your seeds are either super old and they're not going to germinate because they're just not good seeds. They're duds. They might not be old, but you can get seeds that are duds. And that is the most likely reason. The only other culprit of seeds not sprouting in milk jugs could be moisture levels. If you have too little moisture, you let your milk jugs dry out. If you don't live in a wet climate, that could be a problem with germination. Potentially, if you let your soil in the milk jug get too wet, depending on what kind of blend you're using, you might have a germination problem, but it's not that likely. You're more likely to have germination problems if your soil is not moist enough. But for the most part, pretty much anything will grow in a milk jug. The only thing I have yet to experiment with is actually bulb starting. I've done a ton of seed starting in milk jugs. I've never done bulb starting. I didn't actually intend to do that this season, but maybe there's food for thought. Maybe somebody should try bulb starting in milk jugs. Today we're seed starting. So you're going to want to take a milk jug. You can use a 4-liter or a 2-liter, whatever you have available. You can even use a pop bottle situation, a 2-liter, I guess those are. That'll work too. I have done that before. Take an X-Acto knife or one of these guys. These is like a box opener from the dollar store. I love these. A knife, whatever you want to cut with, and make your incision around the handle level of the container. And you're going to want to leave a tiny little lip at the end just so that that container has something to keep it together. Just cutting around. Whoop, there's still a little bit of moisture in there in that milk jug. It's pretty fresh. Cut around that milk jug. So we now have an opening. Now you may or may not want to do your drainage holes in the bottom before you do your upper incision. I don't really think it matters. Some people prefer one way or the other. You're going to want to take your knife and put some good drainage holes in the bottom of the milk jug for water. You don't want your seedlings getting waterlogged. So this is about how many drainage holes I poked in. You could do more, less, whatever you like. Next, grab a seed starting mix. It does not matter what brand you use. I have definitely used seed starting mix from the dollar store before, and it has been just fine. So you're going to fill your container about 1/2 to 3/4 full of a seed starting mix. If you did choose to use soil from your garden, the one thing that you need to consider is the germination. You will likely still get a few of your seeds that germinate, but the rate of how many seeds to germinate is going to be likely much smaller than if you use a seed starting mix. Soil from your garden is going to be much denser and harder for the seeds to sprout up from in the soil. So think about that. Nothing wrong with using garden soil, but you're not going to have as good germination. So we're going to fill our milk jug with soil. Seed starting mix. Oops. I am making a big mess. That is one of the joys of gardening, for better or for worse. It is a mess-making situation. So we've got our milk jug full of soil, and next we are going to add an amendment. This is absolutely not necessary. I personally do this because I want those seedlings to be very robust. I want them to have like go-getter energy. So that is why I'm adding an amendment. I have done this many times. I started out just using seed starting mix, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm going for go-getter plants. So in order to do that, I'm going to use some, it's called Kelptastic. I've never used this before. I'm not sponsored. Got it at Canadian Tire. And this is a Canadian kelp meal. I have used many kelp meals before. This is not made on Vancouver Island, but is local to British Columbia, made in the interior, in Vernon of all places. Very interesting. And we're gonna add some to this mix. It is 1% nitrogen and 2% potash. For anyone who's wondering, I always like to add something that has a little more nitrogen to get the seeds going. Potash is a great amendment too. So I think these seedlings are going to be off to a great start. And I'll show you what kelp meal looks like if you've never seen it before. This is what it looks like, kind of a granular substance. And I'm just going to mix some into my seed starting mix before we put the seeds in. And this year I'm doing a little experiment with my milk jugs. Instead of using vermiculite, which I have used several times in the past with starting these milk jugs, I am instead using perlite. There is definitely a difference between perlite and vermiculite. The original purpose, or what most perlite containers say, is that perlite is basically for improving the drainage of soils, which is definitely true. And vermiculite is more for seed starting or getting things off to good root development, that kind of thing. So am I using it for an unconventional purpose? Yes. So vermiculite, sometimes we sprinkle that on top. And the purpose of that, if you're in a wet climate, is to stop the growth of algae and moss on top of the top layer of soil in your milk jug. But I'm going to try this with the perlite. I actually don't have vermiculite right now. I could have bought some. I just wasn't feeling the vermiculite this season. And I decided I'm going to try that with perlite. I don't think it's going to sabotage my seedlings. I'm going to do a very thin layer and just see how it goes. Definitely don't need to do this step, and I can't tell you the results because I haven't done it yet. Next, we are going to add some seeds to our mixture here. I'm going to start with my African daisies and see how this goes. Ooh, I love these seeds. You've never seen African daisy seeds? This is what they look like. And we're going to put some into this little container. And just a little note in terms of seed starting in milk jugs, it is not worth to put an excessive quantity of seeds in a single container. I have done it before. You don't need to do it. You're going to regret it. It's way too hard to thin the seeds out, whether it's greens or flowers. It just gets really complicated if you put an excessive quantity of seeds. There's no reason you can't put, say, 10, 15 seeds in a container. It's still a lot, but you don't know if they're going to germinate. But don't go for the whole package. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. Learn from my previous experience. So I've got my seeds in here. I'm just going to lightly press them in. They really don't need to be very deep in these little milk jugs. Now I'm going to sprinkle with a very fine layer of my vermiculite. That's what it looks like. Kind of like a, I don't know, a white something or other powder. I don't want to say icing sugar, but a little bit like icing sugar. And again, not necessary. I'm just doing this as my own experiment instead of vermiculite. There we go. Now you're going to want to water your little seeds into your milk jug. And we're going to close them up. If you have any plant labels, you can certainly add a popsicle stick or a plant label, those little plasticky ones, whatever you have, into the interior of your milk jug. I'm going to label on the outside, and I know this might rub off. It does sometimes with a Sharpie. Sometimes I do both. Sometimes I inside label and outside label. Today I'm just outside labeling, but something to keep in mind in a moist climate that sometimes the Sharpies rub off. And make sure you put some form of label on your container, otherwise you're going to have some real plants, seedling mysteries come springtime. Put the label on there. And now we're going to find a little home for our milk jug out in the great outdoors. Here is where my milk jug is going to live for the next few months until it is mature enough to be planted in the landscape. I'm going to go ahead and do some more seed starting. If you watch some of my upcoming videos, you may see what I plant. Thank you so much for joining me for our little milk jug chat. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and we will see you back in the garden really soon. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you are out in the world spreading a little love, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.